The prison air smelled of rust and burnt oil. Faint light leaked through the high vents, turning the dust into tiny golden specks that floated like ghosts. Chains rattled softly whenever the guards passed by, their heavy boots echoing against the cold floor. Behind the iron bars in the far corner sat a figure most prisoners feared to even look at. She had been there for months, unmoving, head bowed, skin like faded stone in the dim light. Many thought she was dead. Others whispered she was worse than dead. The human soldier named Eric had been brought in only 2 days ago. He was not like the other broken prisoners. His eyes carried a spark, and his mouth carried too many words. He laughed at the smallest things, and he mocked the largest dangers. That morning, when he saw the chained figure in the corner, he leaned closer to another prisoner and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. She looks like a dried-up corpse left to rot, sleeping forever in her own dust. The other prisoner gave him a hard look, but said nothing. Eric smirked and walked toward the cage. The figure did not move. Her hair hung in wild silver tangles, covering most of her face. Her shoulders were narrow but strong beneath the grime. She breathed so slowly it was almost invisible. Eric crouched beside the bars, peering in as if inspecting an old relic. "Wake up, mummy," he said, his voice playful but edged with arrogance. "Or are you too far gone to notice a real warrior standing in front of you?" The room around him seemed to grow quieter, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something, somewhere above them. A loud clang from the upper walkways broke the silence. A guard shouted orders in a language Eric did not know. The prisoners shifted uneasily. Eric stayed where he was, still grinning at the unmoving figure. "I've fought better-looking enemies," he added, tapping the bars with his knuckles. "At least they had some fight in them. You're just—" His words cut off when the figure's head lifted slightly, just enough for a sliver of her face to show beneath the tangled hair. Her skin was not faded stone at all. It was the deep, flawless blue of a calm ocean under moonlight. Her eyes stayed shut, but her lips parted as if tasting the air. Eric blinked, suddenly aware of how close he was to the bars. Before he could step back, a chain rattled, and a slender blue arm shot forward through the gap. Her hand, cold and impossibly fast, closed around his throat. The grip was not crushing yet, but it was firm enough to stop him from pulling away. The other prisoners froze, their gazes locked on the scene. A guard turned the corner, saw what was happening, and hesitated instead of rushing forward. Eric's grin vanished as he tried to pry her fingers from his neck. Her skin was smooth, the strength in her hand terrifying. She had not even opened her eyes. The only sound was her slow breathing, steady and calm, as if she was still asleep. "You think a warrior sleeps forever," she said in a low voice, the words rolling out like the edge of a storm. "But warriors only rest until the right enemy comes close enough." Eric swallowed, feeling the pressure against his windpipe. Her chains clinked softly as she shifted her grip, not tighter, but unshakable. The guards stayed back, muttering to each other. No one dared to interrupt. It was not clear who they feared more, her, or what she might do if stopped. Eric's mind raced. He had faced death before, but never in the hands of someone who looked both broken and beautiful at the same time. Her hair brushed against the bars as she leaned forward, still with her eyes closed. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. She spoke again, and this time her words carried something heavier. "You woke me, human. You cannot undo that." The chains rattled once more, and the shadows in the cell seemed to stretch toward him like living things. The guards did not rush to save Eric. Instead, they exchanged wary glances, as if they had seen this before and wanted no part in it. The nearest one tightened his grip on his rifle, but made no move forward. The prisoners around them shifted uneasily, some stepping back from the bars. There was a quiet tension in the air that felt heavier than the chains on her wrists. Eric tried to pull away again, but her grip did not loosen. Her fingers felt like steel wrapped in silk, unmoving despite his strength. He thought about hitting her arm, but something about her still closed eyes made him hesitate. This was not rage. This was control. She was holding him because she chose to, not because she was desperate. Her head tilted slightly, and he caught a better view of her face. The sharp line of her jaw, the high cheekbones, the faint shimmer of her skin under the dim light. She looked far younger than he expected, and far more dangerous. Her hair swayed forward, brushing against his cheek. It smelled faintly of something. Clean and cold, like mountain air. Her voice came again, soft but cutting through the silence. "Why did you mock me, human?" she asked. Eric swallowed before answering. "You were still. You didn't move." "I thought you were." He stopped himself before saying the word. Her grip tightened just enough to remind him he was one breath away from losing it. "I thought you were gone," he finished, his voice quieter. She didn't respond right away, but he could feel the slow rise and fall of her breathing. Her calm made his heart race faster. Finally she leaned back, loosening her hold just slightly, but keeping her fingers on his throat. "Gone is not the same as asleep," she said. "And asleep is not the same as defeated." Her words sank deep, heavier than the chains around her. She let go of him suddenly, the release so fast that he stumbled back and almost fell. Her head lowered again, her eyes still closed. It was as if she had returned to her original stillness, but now the air around her felt charged with warning. Eric rubbed his neck, unsure whether to feel relieved or insulted. The other prisoners avoided looking at him. One older man whispered, "You don't touch her. You don't even speak to her unless she speaks first." The warning came too late, but Eric filed it away. He had seen fighters before, but there was something else here. Something the guards feared. Something the prisoners respected. He didn't know her name, but he knew she wasn't ordinary. From the far side of the room, a deep metallic alarm began to sound. The guards tensed, barking orders in that same alien language. One ran toward the exit, another stayed to watch the prisoners. The alarm's pulse echoed through the walls, a steady beat like a second heartbeat. Eric noticed that the chained woman's head lifted just slightly at the sound, though her eyes stayed shut. The overhead lights flickered. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Somewhere above, something heavy moved, making the floor tremble. The guards began unhooking weapons from their belts, looking more nervous than before. Eric glanced at the chained woman and saw the faintest curve of her lips, not quite a smile. It was the first expression he had seen her make, and it sent a chill through him. A loud crash from the corridor shook the cell blocks. One of the gates in the distance rattled under the force of something slamming into it. Prisoners backed away from their doors, shouting in panic. The alarm grew louder, faster. Eric turned back toward her cell and noticed her fingers tightening around the chains at her wrists. The metal links strained under the pressure, creaking in protest. "Stay away from the bars," one guard shouted, pointing his rifle toward her. She didn't move back. She didn't speak. She only stood, slow and deliberate, until her full height was revealed. Even without opening her eyes, she seemed to fill the space with presence. The guard's hands shook slightly as he kept his weapon aimed. Eric realized then that the alarm was not for the prisoners at all. It was for whatever was coming through those gates, and she knew it. The crashing from the corridor came again, louder this time. Metal bent under the force of repeated impacts. The guards shouted orders at each other, forming a shaky line near the main gate. Some prisoners pressed themselves against the back walls of their cells. Others whispered to one another, their voices tense with fear. The chained woman stood motionless, but Eric noticed her breathing had grown deeper. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the room, followed by the screech of bolts snapping free. The main gate jerked open just enough for shadows to move. Inside, a low growl rolled through the air, making the hairs on Eric's arms stand up. The guards raised their weapons, aiming at the dark gap in the gate. None of them looked confident. Eric's eyes flicked toward the woman again, and he saw her tilt her head toward the sound as if listening to a voice only she could hear. A clawed hand shot through the gap, slamming against the bars with such force that sparks flew. The prisoners gasped. One guard opened fire, the sharp cracks of energy bolts lighting up the gloom. The thing on the other side roared and shoved harder, bending the gate inward. The guards poured more shots into the gap, but the pressure from the other side did not slow. Eric felt the vibration of each impact in his chest. Without warning, the chained woman stepped forward until she was right at the bars, the chains on. Her wrists and ankles rattled against the floor. She stood straight now, her shoulders squared, her head held high. Her eyes were still shut, but Eric felt the weight of her attention shift toward the invading presence. Her lips moved, forming words so quiet that only he could hear. "It has come sooner than I thought," she said. Another crash made the entire room shudder. One of the guards fell back, his weapon slipping from his grasp. The others tried to keep formation, but fear was eating at their focus. The gate gave way under a final brutal shove, swinging open and slamming into the wall. A massive creature stepped into view, its frame hunched to fit under the ceiling. Its skin was like cracked stone, its eyes burning with a dull orange light. The heat from its body rolled into the prison like a furnace. Prisoners screamed and scrambled to the far corners of their cells. The guards opened fire again, filling the air with searing bolts of energy. The creature roared and swept one arm in a wide arc, smashing two guards into the wall with bone-crushing force. Eric backed away from the bars, but the woman remained. Still, her head tilted slightly upward toward the monster. Her chain seemed almost ready to break under the tension in her limbs. The creature's gaze swept the room until it landed on her. It froze mid-step, its roar dying in its throat. The burning glow in its eyes flickered, dimming for a moment. The woman finally opened her eyes, and the sight made Eric's breath catch. They were bright silver, almost blinding in the dim light, and they locked onto the beast with unshakable focus. "You remember me," she said, her voice low but carrying across the room. The monster let out a deep, rumbling sound that was neither a growl nor a roar. It stepped closer to her cell, ignoring the guards still firing at it. Each step made the floor tremble. The heat around it grew stronger. Eric could feel sweat running down his back. The woman raised her hands, the chain scraping against the bars, and for the first time, she pulled with real force. The metal links groaned under the strain. A guard shouted at her to stop, but his voice broke halfway through the order. The fizzy creature was almost at her cell now, lowering its head to meet her gaze through the bars. It spoke in a guttural, alien language, the sound thick and heavy. Eric didn't understand the words, but the tone made his skin crawl. She answered in the same language, her voice smooth and cold. The chains rattled again as she took another step forward. With a sudden sharp crack, one of the links on her wrist shattered. The sound rang through the room like a warning bell. The other prisoners fell silent, watching as she slowly pulled the broken length of chain free. The monster's eyes flared brighter, and it lowered itself further, almost bowing. She glanced briefly at Eric, and he could not read her expression, but he felt certain that whatever happened next would change everything. The broken chain dangled from her wrist, the jagged metal glinting under the flickering lights. The sound of the snapped link still echoed in Eric's ears. The monster in front of her seemed to breathe slower, as if waiting for her next move. The guards hesitated, no longer sure if they should shoot at the creature or aim at her. The tension pulled the air tight, making every breath feel heavy. She shifted her stance, placing one bare foot forward. The remaining chains scraped against the floor, each movement controlled and deliberate. Her eyes never left the beast's glowing ones. Eric could see the muscles in her arms and shoulders tightening, the faint shimmer of her skin catching the dim light. When she spoke, her words were low but carried to every corner of the cell block. "You have grown weaker," she said. The monster rumbled, its voice rolling like distant thunder. It stepped closer, lowering its massive head toward the bars. Heat radiated off its body, the air between them shimmering like a mirage. Eric noticed the guards shifting back, none willing to stand between them. The prisoners clung to the bars of their cells, wide-eyed. The woman raised her hands higher, curling her fingers around the metal of the cage. Her chains clinked softly, but her focus was locked on the creature. With a sudden pull, she wrenched one of the thick vertical bars outward. The metal groaned before snapping at the base. Sparks shot from the broken welds as she tossed the bent bar aside. The gap she made was just wide enough for her to step through. The monster gave a sound that might have been approval. Eric felt his pulse quicken, unsure if she meant to attack the creature or join it. She stepped through the gap with slow, graceful movements, the chain still trailing behind her. The heat from the beast wrapped around her like a living cloak. The guards shouted warnings, but their voices shook. One fired a desperate shot, but the bolt fizzled against an invisible shimmer that surrounded her. She turned her head slightly toward the shooter, her silver eyes bright with silent warning, and he froze where he stood, standing fully outside her cell. She reached up and touched the beast's head. The creature closed its eyes at her touch, lowering itself even more. She spoke again in that alien language, the tone softer now but still commanding. Eric could not understand the words, yet he felt their weight. The creature's posture changed, less tense, almost reverent. The sight made him question who truly held the power in this moment. The guards seemed to realize they were losing control of the situation. One barked an order, and several moved to surround her. The beast opened its eyes again, the glow brightening dangerously. It let out a roar that shook the walls, forcing the guards to stumble back. The sound hit Eric's chest like a physical force. The woman's hand remained steady on the creature's head, her gaze unwavering. She had not moved an inch since the roar began. She turned her attention back to the guards, speaking in their language this time. Her voice was clear and sharp. "If you fire again, you die first." The words froze them where they stood. Eric saw the disbelief on their faces, but none raised a weapon again. It was not just the threat, it was the way she spoke, with the certainty of someone who had never needed to repeat herself. Even the beast seemed to wait for her signal. Then she looked at Eric. For a moment, he felt pinned in place by her eyes. "You will follow me," she said simply. It was not a request. It was a statement that left no room for refusal. Eric swallowed and nodded before his mind could think of a reason to argue. Something told him his life depended on staying close to her now. The beast shifted aside, creating a clear path deeper into the prison. Without looking back, she began to walk toward the far exit, the creature matching her pace like a silent guardian. The remaining chain links clinked softly with each step. The guards did not try to block her path. The prisoners whispered her name, though Eric could not catch it clearly. All he knew was that the woman he had mocked only days ago now walked free, and the monster that had shattered their gates followed her like a loyal hound. The corridor beyond the cell block was darker, the overhead lights broken or flickering weakly. The air smelled of damp stone and burnt wiring. The woman walked without hesitation, her steps quiet and measured. The beast stayed close beside her, its massive shoulders brushing the walls as it moved. Eric followed a few paces behind, his eyes darting between her and the creature. He could feel the heat radiating from its body, but it was her presence that kept his heartbeat unsteady. Shadows moved in the corners as they passed, but none dared to step into their path. The sound of their steps echoed in the narrow hallway, each clang of chain or scrape of claw sharp in the silence. The woman's silver eyes glowed faintly, guiding her way through the gloom. Eric wondered if she even needed light to see. She did not look back at him, but somehow he knew she was aware of his every movement. The hallway opened into a larger chamber, its walls lined with strange alien machinery. Dim blue lights pulsed across the consoles, casting long, jagged shadows. On the floor, the beast paused at the threshold, sniffing the air. The woman stepped forward, scanning the room. Eric hesitated, his instincts warning him that this place was not empty. Then he heard the faint shuffle of movement above them. Figures dropped from the overhead platforms, landing in a loose circle around them. They wore armor of dark metal with faint red markings, and carried weapons shaped like curved blades, mixed with energy emitters. Their helmets hid their faces, but the way they moved was precise and deliberate. Eric counted at least 10. The woman did not flinch. The beast let out a low growl, its body lowering into a ready stance. One of the armored figures stepped forward, speaking in the same alien language Eric had heard before. The tone was sharp and demanding. The woman's expression did not change, but her hand rested lightly on the beast's neck. She answered with only a few words, her voice calm. The figure hesitated, then gestured sharply to the others. They began to close in, weapons raised. Eric took a step back, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. The woman moved before anyone else could strike. She turned, her chains whipping through the air like metal whips. The nearest attacker was struck across the helmet, sent sprawling to the floor. The beast surged forward with a roar, knocking two others aside with a sweep of its massive arm. The clash filled the chamber with sharp metallic sounds and the crackle of energy weapons. Eric ducked under a swing aimed at him, his knife slicing through one attacker's side armor. Despite their numbers, the attackers began to falter. The woman's movements were impossibly fast, her chain striking with both precision and force. She seemed to know exactly where each enemy would be before they moved. The beast fought with brutal strength, each blow from its limbs breaking weapons or sending armored bodies crashing into the walls. Eric stayed close, striking when openings appeared, though he knew most of the fight was being carried by the two in front of him. One of the attackers managed to fire an energy bolt that grazed the woman's shoulder. The wound barely slowed her, but Eric saw her eyes narrow slightly. She lunged at the shooter, grabbing the front of their armor and slamming them into the ground. The impact cracked the floor beneath them. She tore the weapon from their hands and tossed it to Eric without looking. "Use it," she said. He caught it awkwardly, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the weapon. Aiming at another attacker, he squeezed the trigger. A burst of red light struck the target in the chest, sending them sprawling. The fight was turning in their favor. The remaining attackers began to retreat, moving toward the same platforms they had dropped from. The woman did not pursue. She stood still, watching them vanish into the shadows above. Silence returned to the chamber, except for the sound of heavy breathing. The beast lowered its head, letting out a slow rumble. The woman glanced at Eric, then turned her gaze to the far door. "We keep moving," she said. Her tone made it clear there would be no rest yet. Eric tightened his grip on the stolen weapon and followed her toward the exit, the sound of their footsteps echoing into the darkness ahead. Asterisk. The far door led them into a passageway, unlike the rest of the prison. The walls here were smooth and clean, made from a pale material that seemed to glow faintly. The air was cooler, carrying a subtle scent of something metallic. The woman walked ahead without slowing, her chains trailing behind her with a steady rhythm. The beast followed at her side, its massive frame filling most of the space. Eric stayed close, his eyes scanning the walls for any sign of danger. They passed strange panels set into the walls, each displaying shifting symbols in a language Eric did not know. Some pulsed with light as they walked past, almost as if reacting to their presence. The woman ignored them completely, her focus fixed on the path ahead. Eric's grip tightened on the stolen weapon. He could hear distant sounds, low vibrations, mechanical hums, and the faint echo of movement somewhere beyond the walls. The passage opened into a wide, circular chamber with a high domed ceiling. A ring of tall, narrow windows let in slivers of pale blue light. In the center stood a raised platform with what looked like a control console, surrounded by cables and glowing conduits. The woman stopped at the edge of the platform, her silver eyes scanning the console. The beast circled the room slowly, sniffing the air with quiet rumbling breaths. Eric took a cautious step toward the platform. "What is this place?" he asked. She did not answer at first. Her hands moved across the console's surface, and symbols shifted rapidly beneath her fingers. The room responded to her touch. A deep, resonant tone filled the air, and the lights around the chamber grew brighter. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "This is where they control the gates. And where they locked me away," she said. Before Eric could ask more, a hidden door slid open on the far side of the chamber. A group of figures stepped through, wearing the same dark armor as the attackers they had fought earlier. But these moved differently, slower, heavier, their armor reinforced with thick plating. Each carried a long spear-like weapon with a faint blue glow at the tip. The woman turned to face them, her posture calm but ready. The beast moved to her side, its claws scraping the floor. The lead figure spoke in their alien tongue, his voice echoing in the chamber. The woman replied in the same language, her tone sharp. The exchange was short, but the tension between them was unmistakable. Without warning, the armored soldiers lowered their weapons and began to advance. Eric raised his stolen gun, but the woman held up a hand, stopping him. "Stay back," she said. She stepped forward to meet the first attacker. His spear thrust toward her chest, but she twisted aside with fluid speed. Her chain whipped upward, wrapping around the weapon's shaft. A sharp pull yanked the soldier off balance, and she drove her knee into his side, sending him crashing to the floor. The beast roared and charged another attacker, its massive claws tearing through the heavy armor with ease. The fight erupted in a storm of motion and sound. The woman moved like a shadow given form, her chain striking with precision and power. The beast fought with raw force, every blow shattering armor and scattering enemies. Eric fired at any opening he saw, each shot dropping another soldier. The blue tips of their spears left glowing trails in the air as they swung, but none could land a killing blow on her. One soldier managed to slice the beast's side, drawing a deep, glowing wound. The creature's roar shook the walls, but it fought harder, swatting the attacker into the far wall. The woman caught another soldier's spear in her bare hand, snapping it in two before slamming the broken end into his chest. The air was thick with heat, energy sparks, and the sharp smell of scorched armor. Within minutes, the last of the soldiers lay on the floor, defeated. Silence fell except for the hum of the console. The woman walked back to it, placing her hands on the surface again. Symbols shifted rapidly, and the deep tone in the chamber changed pitch. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a passage leading downward. She glanced at Eric, her expression unreadable. "We go deeper," she said. Without hesitation, she stepped toward the opening, the beast limping slightly but keeping close to her side as they disappeared into the shadows beyond. The passage sloped downward in a slow spiral, the walls narrowing as they descended. Faint lights embedded in the floor glowed with a cold white hue, casting long shadows behind them. The air grew cooler, carrying a faint hum that seemed to vibrate in Eric's bones. The woman walked ahead with steady steps, her chains dragging softly against the smooth floor. The beast followed close, its breathing heavy but controlled. Eric kept his weapon ready, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The place felt different from the rest of the prison, almost like it had been built for another purpose entirely. The walls here had no marks of wear, no signs of battle or decay. Everything was clean and precise, as though untouched by time. The hum grew louder with each step, and he began to feel it in his chest. They reached a set of tall, seamless doors that looked like they were carved from a single piece of metal. Strange symbols pulsed faintly across their surface, shifting as if alive. The woman stopped in front of them, raising one hand. Her silver eyes brightened, and the chains around her wrists moved slightly, almost as if responding to an unseen pull. The doors slid open without a sound, revealing a vast chamber bathed in soft blue light. The ceiling rose high above them, supported by towering columns etched with glowing lines. In the center of the room stood a massive structure shaped like an open claw, cradling a sphere of swirling light. The hum filled the space completely now, making every word and movement feel heavy. Eric stared at the sphere, unable to look away. It shifted like liquid, its colors moving in patterns too complex. To follow, the woman stepped forward toward the sphere. The beast hesitated at the edge of the chamber, lowering its head slightly as if in respect. Eric moved to follow her, but slowed his pace, watching her carefully. She reached the base of the claw-shaped structure and placed her hands on it. The sphere reacted instantly, flaring brighter, sending streaks of light racing along the columns and walls. Her voice was calm when she spoke, though her words carried a weight that made Eric's skin prickle. "This is why they kept me here. This is why they feared me." The sphere's glow reflected in her silver eyes, making them appear brighter than ever. Eric took another step forward, his grip tightening on the weapon. "What is it?" he asked. She looked at him, and for a brief moment, he thought she might tell him. Instead, she turned back to the sphere. The light inside the sphere began to twist, forming shapes that almost looked like landscapes in cities, then breaking apart again. The hum deepened, vibrating through the floor and up into Eric's legs. The beast let out a low rumble, stepping closer to the woman. She rested, one hand on its head without looking away from the sphere. Her other hand moved across the surface of the claw, and the patterns of light shifted again. Suddenly, the chamber's far doors slammed open. A squad of heavily armed soldiers rushed in, their armor brighter and heavier than any they had faced before. At their front was a tall figure wearing a flowing black mantle, his helmet crowned with sharp metal ridges. His voice cut through the hum, speaking in the alien language. The woman turned slowly to face him, her chain swaying with the movement. Eric raised his weapon, but she lifted a hand to stop him. The tall figure stepped forward, his gaze locked on the sphere. He spoke again, his tone low and dangerous. The woman's reply was short and cold. Whatever she said made the figure raise one arm, signaling his soldiers to spread out. The beast growled, its claws scraping deep marks into the floor. The soldiers aimed their weapons, the air between them tense and ready to break. She stepped away from the sphere, moving to stand between it and the soldiers. Her silver eyes swept over them like a blade. "You will not take it," she said. The tall figure hesitated only a second before giving the order to attack. The chamber erupted with light and sound as both sides moved at once, and the hum of the sphere rose higher, pulsing in time with the clash that had begun. The clash inside the chamber shook, the air like a storm breaking against stone. The soldiers moved in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the sphere's shifting light. Energy bolts flashed through the space, striking columns and leaving scorched marks. The beast tore into their lines with sweeping claws, scattering bodies and shattering weapons. The woman moved with impossible speed, her chains singing through the air as they struck, each blow breaking armor like brittle glass. Eric fired from the edge of the platform, aiming at soldiers who tried to circle around. His weapon kicked in his hands, the bursts of light making his eyes sting. He kept moving, never staying in one place long enough to be an easy target. 2 soldiers broke from the group and rushed toward him, their blades glowing blue. He dropped, one with a shot to the chest, then ducked under the other's swing and sent him crashing into the floor. The tall figure in the black mantle stood back, watching the fight with cold precision. His eyes, hidden behind his helmet, never left the woman. When their gazes finally met, he stepped forward, drawing a blade unlike any Eric had seen. Its surface rippled with shifting light, as if alive. The woman turned to face him, her chains loose at her sides but ready. The soldiers gave them space, forming a wide circle around the two. They met in a blur of motion. His blade struck with speed and force, each swing cutting through the air with a hum. She moved just out of reach each time, her chains snapping toward him in sharp counters. Sparks flew when steel met metal. The sound of their fight drowned out even the hum of the sphere. Eric wanted to help, but he knew he would be in the way. This was their battle alone. The tall figure pressed harder, his strikes growing faster. She began to match his speed, her chains twisting around his weapon, pulling it offline. For a moment, she caught his wrist, forcing him to his knees. But with a sudden surge of strength, he broke free, slashing across her side. The cut was shallow, but it drew a bright streak against her blue skin. She did not cry out. She only stepped forward again. The beast roared from across the chamber, breaking through a cluster of soldiers to reach her. One soldier leaped onto its back, driving a blade deep into its neck. The creature threw him off with a violent twist, but the wound bled in glowing streams. Eric shot the attacker before he could rise again. The beast kept moving, refusing to fall. Its eyes locked on the woman, as if willing her to win. She caught the tall figure's neck strike in both hands, her chains wrapping around the blade. With a sharp pull, she twisted it from his grasp, sending it skidding across the floor. In the same motion, she stepped in close, her palm striking his chest with a force that cracked the armor. He staggered back, gasping, before she slammed him into one of the glowing columns. The impact shattered the column's surface, sending waves of light surging through the chamber. The soldiers froze as the sphere flared, its glow filling every corner of the room. The hum became a deep, resonant pulse that shook the ground. The woman turned toward it, raising her hands. Light flowed from the sphere into her chains, racing up her arms and across her body. Her silver eyes blazed brighter than ever. When she spoke, her voice was layered with the sphere's tone. "This ends now," she said. A shockwave burst outward from her, knocking every soldier off their feet. The tall figure's body went limp, his armor smoking where her strike had landed. The beast let out a deep rumble and sank to one knee, lowering its head. Eric stood frozen, his weapon lowered, staring at her as the light from the sphere slowly faded. She stepped down from the platform, her chains no longer dragging but hanging silent and still. She stopped in front of Eric, her gaze holding his. "You followed," she said. He nodded without a word. She looked past him to the open doorway, then back to the sphere. "Then you will see what comes next." With a single gesture, she called the beast to her side. Together, they walked toward the far exit, leaving the silent chamber and the broken soldiers behind. Eric followed close, knowing his life would never be the same again.